Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Geek Garage podcast. Of course, I'm your host, David, as per usual. Ted is off this week again. His place is now usurped by one of the greatest voices of our generation. No, she. I mean, I don't want to oversell it yet, undersell it. Her name is Kayla Jackson, and we first started slinging breadsticks at Olive Garden once upon a time. That's where I know her from the best. Slinging those sticks, that endless soup and salad. However, once we parted ways, that's kind of when we started getting into our own things. And instead of me giving you guys the official / unofficial oral history of her career, I'm going to take this opportunity to welcome her and let her do it for herself. So everyone, please welcome Kayla. Kayla, how are you doing, darling?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm super glad to be here. I'm excited to be part of the show today.
Yay!
Yay!
I'm so excited to have you too. And thank you so much again for agreeing to do this. I hope that it ends up not being super painful for you.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we've had quite a few repeat guests on the podcast in the past. So just going off of that, it seems like we are doing something, at least a few things right, to where people actually want to come back on. They're not leaving and they're like, God, that was the worst experience of my entire life. So yeah, so I greatly appreciate you coming on. I know a lot of listeners are probably not familiar with you or familiar with your work. Do you want to start by giving our listeners just a brief summary of your career thus far in adulting, as it were, and everything that you've done leading up to your decision to make the move into voice acting?
Sure. Yeah, so I didn't know I wanted to be a voice actor until I started becoming one. I was actually a music major, and I did music for the better part of a decade. I started, as a wee young lass in 5th grade, as most of us do, middle school band.
Mm-hmm.
And I did band all through my first year of college. So, I was first chair, I was drum major in my high school, I did marching band, I marched cymbals in college. And it was the thing that I really wanted to do. I wanted to be a music teacher. I wanted to teach high school marching band. And after my first semester in college, the realization hit me that I actually didn't want to do that anymore. Which is kind of devastating when you've spent 10 years of your life like, "This is what I'm gonna do forever and ever," and then you have no idea what you wanna do. Um, so I quit school after my first year, um, and,
Hell yeah.
I no student debt anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I say hell yeah for multiple reasons, but I mean, hell yeah, first of all, for quitting when making that bold decision, and two, the student loan debt thing, that kicks ass. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that I'm not paying off tens of thousands of dollars for something that I
you,
didn't use.
yeah, you should be, because I cannot say the same for myself.
But yeah, after I quit school, I did the whole retail thing. I was actually a preschool teacher for a little bit, so I did that. I
Hmm.
started working at Olive Garden, which is where we met.
Hmm.
So I did that. I think I was there for about a year, and then I started working for Lego. I did that for a year. And then I started working for GameStop, and I was there up until last year. I was a store manager for almost 6 years. So that was a lot of fun. And
Uh-huh.
then I quit to be a voice actor, and that's what I do now. That's my full-time job. But a lot of what led up to that is I've loved video games since I was 4, and my whole life growing up, cartoons, we would watch Saturday morning cartoons, my little brother and I.
Hmm.
SpongeBob was one of our favorites. Um, and I remember growing up and, that was something that my dad and I would voice these characters back and forth. We'd repeat the cartoons. We would do imitations back and forth to each other. We still do, and I'm, almost 28 years old, and I still do that with my dad.
Aw.
Um, Yeah, so getting into the career of voice acting, I got super into playing Dungeons& and Dragons with my friends.
Okay,
Yeah,
excellent.
it's a lot of fun.
I've always wanted to get into it, especially since we did our Dungeons and Dragons episode, which I mean, it was a long time ago. But up until that point, I really didn't know anything about the game. And at the end of the episode, I was like, "Fuck! Like, I want to play now."
Let's
I
play right
just
now.
right. It's just I hear about how much of a time suck it can be. So I was like,
It's
"Yeah."
it certainly can be. Yeah, I started we just were playing home games, we went out, we all bought
Mhm.
player's guides, we got the dice, we got character sheets, and we just started playing and learning the rules, and, eventually, I found a place out in Hermitage that hosted Friday night D&D, and so we started going, and it was every other Friday night, so it was biweekly, which was really great for our schedules being, with GameStop.
Mhm.
And we started
Was it
playing with
was
sorry,
it
go
the
ahead.
GameKeep?
It was the GameCube, yes!
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Yes,
I used to live right around the corner, from the
nice.
GameKeep. I
Yeah,
very rarely went because at that point in time, I wasn't really into, like, tabletop stuff and, analog gaming, but, yeah, I was just curious if it was the GameKeep, so,
it
yeah.
is,
Anyways,
absolutely. Yeah, no, it was a lot of
sorry.
fun, and I no, you're good. Yeah, Carl is fantastic, and actually, he just retired last week, so congrats to
Oh,
Carl.
yeah,
Yeah,
congrats to him.
congrats to him. Um, but yeah, we started playing Adventure League there, and we met a lot of really awesome people, and, our table of people was fantastic. We had a lot of really good role players, lots of really kind, welcoming people.
That's
Um,
great.
it was fantastic, and so we started doing that just before Tomb of Annihilation came out, and so right then we were players, and then when Tomb of Annihilation came out, I was offered to be a DM, and I was really excited, and so I started DMing, which, by the way, Tomb of Annihilation is not a good one to introduce a DM. It was really hard.
Okay.
Um,
It's I mean, it sounds hard as fuck, like, just hardcore,
it was very
like
hard,
Tomb of
yeah.
Annihilation.
If it if it puts into perspective, there was a character who my table was supposed to guide out into, the forest, the swamp, wherever, and they were supposed to assassinate him. Well,
Mhm.
my table decided they were going to befriend him instead. And so I had to rewrite the entire plan that I had for that evening
Oh,
because
no.
they befriended him and he became part of the party, and it was wild.
Wow.
Um,
So
yeah.
I mean, like, this is just a little bit of a sidebar tangent thing, but, like I said, I'm not super familiar with D&D and D and all the rules, but, like, I'm assuming that since that happened, it's not against the rules, like, for them to make that decision to befriend this person?
No, not at all, and
Okay.
that's the fun thing about D&D is a lot of it is it's imagination and math, that's it.
And
A lot of it
probably
is
some improv skills.
yeah, absolutely, and that's really what kinda led into the whole voiceover thing is I fell in love with improv and acting and creating voices and creating characters and backstories, and, it was something that never clicked in my mind that I could do something like that.
Mhm.
Having grown up with imitating cartoons with my dad and, um, just loving movies and characters, it it was very surreal to have found a career that I could do and love so much, especially after, music having fallen through. Um, so I started watching, Critical Role, which we've talked about briefly, and
Right, yeah.
that was really the driving point for me was I had posted something about it, and, my grandmother actually had commented and was like, "Oh, do you listen to podcasts?" I was like, "Well, this one's really nerdy, it's about D&D," and D, and she's like, "Have you ever thought about doing voiceover?" And it was no, I haven't thought about doing voiceover ever because that's to me, that was such a far off thing that didn't exist in my realm of the universe.
Mhm.
And so my grandmother actually knew my very first coach and, gave me her phone number, told me to give her a call, and I did. We set up our very first coaching session. And, I had nothing. I had no equipment. I had my laptop and some gaming headphones. And so I sat in the floor with the laptop and the headphones and we had our very first session. We read through different kinds of scripts just to kind of analyze where I was at. And it was just this euphoric feeling of, oh my gosh, this is the
Wow.
thing. This is the thing I've been looking for all these years that I want to do. And
Aw.
it's kind of history from there. I grew in my coaching and I studied and I've put in countless hundreds, probably thousands of hours of training and coaching, and dollars into equipment. But
By the
yeah.
way, I'm literally getting chills right now, because like, not to make this sound about me, but like I personally know what it feels like to find something where you're like, holy shit, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and like, yeah, went to hear you say that when you came across it in that training session, that's how you felt it, since
Absolutely.
since chills. I was like, oh, like I know that feeling.
Yes, you
It's so
know, so
great.
it's such a surreal feeling, especially after you've spent so many years like, "Gosh, what do I wanna do?" And you've went
Hmm.
through, the music thing, and I had so many different things that I wanted to do with my life, and, I would try it for a week or 2, and then I was like, "Nah, this isn't it, this isn't it, this isn't it." And so finding voiceover and being in my first session and just every session from there on out, I mean, I never stop training. I have coaching sessions all the time. Every single one of them, I learn something new. I love it. Like, even just being in my booth here right now, it's just like, I'm so thankful and so happy to be here. Like, this is what
That
I do.
Yeah, that's awesome. When you texted me last night, where you were like, "Is it okay if I like have a microphone and record in my booth or whatever you said?" I was like, "Holy shit! Like she's probably gonna sound better than me. Like, like, duh, you're gonna sound better than me because you're a professional voice actor. But like as far as the audio quality goes, I was like, oh man, she's got stuff that I don't
Yeah, I
have."
I've got a decent setup here. I have not invested in the all-powerful whisper rooms yet. But
Sure.
that is a long-term goal for me for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely something I need to look into for my office. I mean, I love having like decorations and stuff up, like all my Star Wars posters and my nerdy stuff that I got hanging on the walls. So to
Yes,
like the idea of replacing it with like foam, like sound deadeners or whatever you want to call those, foam pads that you hang on the walls, or
sure.
I know there's other like canvas style things that also help block sound. Yeah, I'm just like, oh, like I don't want to ditch some of my nerdy stuff.
I just reorganized my desk, and my desk is in the other room, because it's
Hmm.
huge, and I'm in a, like, 4 by 4 box right now. So,
Okay.
yeah, I don't have any decorations in here, I just have my sound panels and, my laptop and a light and my
Sure.
equipment, but on my desk, I have, my Funko Pops, and I just got a really cool replica Majora's Mask for Christmas, and it's
Oh,
amazing.
nice.
I
That's
know, it's
awesome.
so cool. So that's
Yeah.
in there. I also just I had just enough space to put probably 5 pops, and I've deemed it my badass women shelf. So right now I've got Cora, I've got Daenerys, of course, because,
Of
Khaleesi is my
course.
nickname. And
Oh yeah,
then
your Khaleesi cosplay, like spot on. Like
thank
it's
you.
fantastic. Yes. Yeah. When I saw it for the first time, I was like, I literally thought it was Daenerys. Like I was like, oh, oh wait, that's not.
It was so I haven't put it on in a little while, but, oh, it was so much fun. I have some pretty fun stories about that
Mm,
I'll have to share later.
sure. Yeah.
Um But yeah, Daenerys, I got that nickname through GameStop probably 4 years ago, I think now.
Okay.
And I had really long platinum blonde hair, and
Hmm.
one of my associates' names was Kaylin, so I was Kayla, she was Kaylin, and my district manager couldn't keep us like, anytime he would call on the phone, he was like, "Which one am I talking to?" And so he's like, "You need a nickname," and so he's like, "I'm gonna start calling you Khaleesi," and I was like, "I'm so here for that." And, I was really into Game of Thrones and, Daenerys was my favorite character, so it kind of panned out, and, here we are 4 years later, and people still call me that. It's on my Starbucks cup every time I get coffee, so
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, I too would if I was into collecting Funko Pops, I would probably have a fierce wall of women warriors as well, because I am all about female empowerment um,
absolutely.
and all that good stuff. Also, just another quick tangent: is it blasphemy to take a Funko Pop out of its case?
Oh,
Is
no,
that
mine are out of the
okay?
box. It's okay.
Okay.
Mine are out of I there are some that I keep in the box, like, my Cowboy Bebop ones are staying in the box because they're special.
Sure.
Um,
Right. Yeah, I know that there's some that are like super hard to find, like, limited productions or
yes.
whatever, that it totally makes sense to keep those in the box
I've got a few of my My Hero Academia ones, a few of, I actually have a Kurama from Naruto that's valued, like, a lot of money, so that one's still in the box.
Nice.
I have, like, the 3 dragons from Game of Thrones, those are still in the box, but most of my other ones, if it's something that I love and I know I'm never gonna sell it, like, all my Sailor Moon pops are out of the box.
Okay.
My Korra I took out of the box, Daenerys is out of the box, and then I also my latest collection is, I just got Ahsoka from Clone Wars, and she is amazing, so I
Oh,
took her out of
nice.
the box too.
Yeah. That's awesome. Have you gone through the trouble of making a Funko Pop of yourself?
I did on the website. I would love to I actually have a blank white DIY Funko Pop that I found at Hot Topic on clearance, like, 3 or 4 years ago, and I've never
Okay.
painted it. I would love to create one of
Oh,
myself. I
nice.
actually saw, um, I can't remember the voice actor that posted it. It's been a few months, but somebody created a Funko Pop of her in the booth with her microphone and actually created the booth for her as well. And like a
Oh,
little
nice.
like, yeah, teeny little microphone. And I was like, man, I can't wait till I get to the point where fans make that for me.
That's awesome. I made one for myself. It's been several years now, like maybe 2017, 2018. But it was definitely back when I still had hair. So, I'm a big old baldy now, so I'd have to redo it. I think all the hair just migrated down south to my face. Like I have
That's
glorious,
cute.
majestic, like COVID beard. It's that I've just done nothing with, so it's just hanging out. But anyways, sorry for that little sidebar there.
No, it's all
Um,
good.
but hey, it's in the theme, keeping it in the theme of nerdy stuff. So
Absolutely.
okay, so start taking some voice acting lessons or some vocal lessons. Um, was there a point where you were like you felt like you had talents, like you mentioned that you're like, this is the place that I should be, that I want to be or need to be, like, did you also feel like you had the talent for it as well?
It's hard it's hard to say. I felt like I could. At the same time, imposter syndrome is very real. Even now,
Mm-hmm.
almost 4 years into my career, it's very much, comparison will steal your joy, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, knowing what I was up against and the voiceover actors that I admired and saw in cartoons, I was a little intimidated going into what a huge industry, but,
Right.
yeah, I did. And especially having the music background, I felt that having those trained ears for sound and for musicality and for intonation, I felt like it was something that I could do, and music has actually been very helpful for me to hear, different tones, different pitches. It's very much hand in hand,
Oh yeah, I bet.
yeah, even I've been taking a couple singing lessons. I took some last year. I haven't taken any, obviously, we're only a week into the new year, but,
Sure.
I took a few last year, and I felt like it was very helpful as far as even just breath support and how
Oh yeah.
to shape my mouth and how to push airflow through. It was
Mm-hmm.
very helpful. So I feel like music was extremely helpful in the voice acting as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that definitely makes sense. Especially the idea of taking taking singing lessons to help out with your voice acting. Like, I mean, you know, it never hurts to have like that skill in your back pocket as well. You know, because you never know when you're going to get a job that requires a little bit of singing along with your voice acting as well. But
Absolutely.
yeah, you know, you mentioned something about like the, you know, breathing techniques and how to shape your mouth. Like that's all stuff that I've actually heard just, you know, through the grapevine of, you know, like talking to people. Like where I work, the company is called Naxos, and we're a musical, we're a distributor of classical music. We're also a label. Um, but everyone that works there is like obviously super into music. A lot of people went to MTSU and got like technical degrees, or in music production, or they majored in a specific instrument. So you know, I've learned a lot about, you know, how the voice works, and, you know, shaping your mouth to make certain noises, and, you know, warm ups and preparation and stuff. So yeah, a lot of what you're saying, you know, makes a lot of sense. So yeah. um so was jumping from this, you know, starting to take lessons and all that, was there like a slowly easing into like starting to get paid gigs, or was it more of like an abrupt jump? How did that transition happen?
It definitely was a slow process.
Okay.
I booked my first job almost a year after I started with my coaching. So I
Okay.
started coaching in the fall of 2017, and I booked my first job, I think it was September or October of 2018. That sounds about right.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I actually booked my first job while I was away in Indianapolis at a GameStop conference, and I had to sneak away from the conference to record it.
Mm,
Um,
nice.
sorry, my old district managers. Um,
I'm sure they've forgiven you,
at this
or
point,
will forgive you. Hey, it's
um,
furthering your career. Whether they think you're going to work at GameStop forever.
absolutely, yeah, it is it started me for a better career.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
but yeah, I did my coaching, and I had many hours of coaching, um, in actual mic technique and script reading, along with the industry and, you know, fair rates and how the industry works and how to get auditions and how to market yourself. So I spent a year doing my coaching, and then I booked a job, and then I recorded my first demo, which is on my website. That's my commercial demo. So that's was recorded 2 years ago now, which is crazy to think.
Right.
um, and then I went to work with other coaches. I've been to several workshops. I've been to several online webinars, lots of conferences. So I feel like I have probably put in, I don't know, I couldn't even spitball a number at you for hours of coaching that I've spent. Um,
Yeah, I'm sure it's a lot, right?
it's a lot, and I think that's probably the biggest influence in a voice acting career. A lot of people jump in and they're like, "All right, I'm gonna go buy a microphone, I'm gonna go buy all the
Mhm.
equipment, and then I'm gonna start coaching." Don't do that. Don't do that. Um, you know, it's a career, it's an investment. It's something that you have to know, A, that you want to do, B,
Mhm.
that you're good enough to do, before you invest, you know, thousands of dollars in equipment. And I think that's the biggest misconception about becoming a voice actor is that you have to have equipment and a studio right off the bat, and you don't. You need to coach. You need to find somebody who can evaluate your talent, can evaluate where you stand. You know, whether it be reading scripts, whether it be how your voice sounds. If you have the ability to learn and be coachable.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I'm getting a little bit off tangent. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, no, that totally fine. I mean, like, you're actually, um, right on par, more or less. Like, you actually started answering questions that we had down to, you know, cross over here very shortly. You know, you mentioned some misconceptions about some voice acting, and that's actually one that I had on our list for just general Q&A questions. Um, you mentioned that what was it that you need to go out and buy like all this expensive fancy equipment first, when really you just need to like figure out if this is what you really want to do and you want to dedicate the your time and energy to it, right?
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of people, think they wanna do it. They're like, "Oh, I wanna be a voice actor. I wanna voice a cartoon character. I wanna voice a video game character," which is great, and I am so excited for anybody that tells me they wanna do that, 'cause everybody starts somewhere. I had to start
Hmm.
somewhere. Everybody has started somewhere. I mean, the most famous voice actors in the world had to start somewhere. Um, I just think a lot of people jump into it and think that it's easy work, it's easy money, it's gonna bring them fame, it's gonna bring them fortune, and it's not. Um, Honestly, video games and animation and the character work are the lowest paying jobs in voice acting, which is
Really?
yeah, absolutely. All the English dubs for anime, those pay very, very little. It's not a lot of money. Granted, there are tons and tons of fun to do,
Sure.
um, but yeah, a lot of the animation stuff, unless you're doing things for, like, Disney or Cartoon Network,
Sure.
um, it's not a big part of voiceover, and a lot of people that do the dubbing, the animation, the video games, they do other things too. They do commercials, they do e-learning, they do medical narration. There's so many different genres of voiceover that it's about finding your niche, and I think that's
Hmm.
kind of the point that I'm at right now is I love, 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 love video games, and that's one of my short-term goals for this year is I want to get my character demo recorded so that I can start booking more video game work. Um, 'Cause right now I do a lot of commercials, I do a lot of narration, I do e-learning, I do, um, just more of, like, the not public stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, but I would love to start getting more into the character stuff, and most of my year last year I spent dedicating to coaching with, I don't know if you're familiar with the Walking Dead Telltale games. Um,
Actually, I think I am. Like, they're not really like action based. It's more like
yeah,
a
the more like a
kind of
graphic
like a
novel.
right. It felt kind of like a choose your own adventure kind of
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely.
Sort of. Yeah, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, my coach, Dave Fenoy, he is the main character, Lee Everett, in the Walking Dead games, and that's probably the
Oh
one that
wow.
most people know him from.
Okay.
Um, I mean, he's done tons and tons of video game stuff and, some animation. I actually when I was watching Clone Wars a couple weeks ago, I was sitting there and somebody one of the characters, I won't say anything about it because I don't know if you've seen it, I don't wanna spoil it, but one of the
Sure.
characters that came on screen, I started listening and I was like, "That's Dave. It's so Dave. I know him." Like, I worked with him, several weeks of the year last year, and I looked it up on IMDb and absolutely it was Dave, and I was like I texted him, or I
Aw.
posted on Facebook. I was like, "Dave, I just heard you on Clone Wars." Um,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
it is.
Um,
It's fun.
yeah, that's. I feel like if I was in that situation, I'd be like, "Why didn't you tell me you were in Clone Wars?"
Yeah. Yeah, and he was such a wonderful coach to work with and really put into to perspective what character work is all about and with commercial, with narration, all the other ones that I mentioned, a lot of it is about clarity in your voice. They want that clean, crisp read on the script.
Mhm.
Um, whereas with animation, with characters, with video games, it's more real, especially with video games nowadays being like you're in the game. It's like they want you to think that you're in the game. Everything is so much more realistic, and so they want those pauses, those stutters, those just intonation differences in the attitude, the emotion, and
Sure.
so it's such a different way of thinking because you have to know how to act. Like, yeah, you might have really cool voices, you might be able to do this really awesome, Mark Hamill impression,
Mhm.
and it's amazing, but can you act is the question, and I think a
Sure.
lot of people overlook that, But yeah, it's a really fun genre to be a part of, and that's something that I want to dive further into this year. And so my 2 goals this year are to get my character demo, or sorry, my video game demo. I'm gonna start with video games, and
Okay.
then, um, book a role in a video game. So that's my goals.
That yeah, that would be awesome. And I mean, I don't even have doubts that you would be able to do that. You have my full I don't know how you say it, support and faith that you're gonna get it done.
I
Um,
appreciate it.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So we had a small section in our notes about inspirations. Now, you talked about when you were a little younger how you and your dad would act out some of the characters that you'd watch cartoons with, and so it seems like maybe your dad, either secondhand or third hand, had some sort of inspiration in you coming to this realization one day that you wanted to do voice acting. uh, were there any like characters from movies and TV, um, and any specific voice actors behind those voices that played any role in that inspiration, would you say?
There's definitely a lot. Um, I would definitely say that my dad inspired the play aspect. So it's one of those things as an actor, you have to know how to play, you know, have to know how to have fun.
Absolutely.
You have to know how to allow yourself to go back to that point of what it felt like to be a kid.
Hmm.
Um, and it's what a lot of voice acting is about, is playing. I mean, I sometimes I'll audition here in my booth and I'll be like arms flailing, going all kinds of places.
Right.
And that's the joy of character acting. But even in commercial or narration, it's kind of the same thing, you know, everything is a character. You might be reading a commercial for, I don't know, diapers, and you're a mom, and that's a character, and, like, you find a character within that. Um, so I would say my dad definitely inspired me to keep that play and keep that joy and, you know, never take things too seriously.
Sure.
Um, as far as other voice actors, I could name names all day long.
Yeah,
Um,
sure. Yeah, go ahead and rattle off some. I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
I would say
as
probably
many as you want.
the 2 that immediately come to mind, Steve Bloom, of course, and, Grey Griffin, and the
Okay.
biggest reasons would be because I grew up with their cartoons. Avatar: The Last Airbender, I mean, Grey plays Azula, that's probably one of the most famous roles that she's played.
Okay.
Um, Steve Bloom plays Spike Spiegel in Cowboy Bebop.
Okay.
Um, but outside of those roles, they have played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different things in my favorite shows, my favorite cartoons. And there's such a versatility to them that's wild. It's amazing. And it's something that inspires me and that I want to be able to do, whether it be to play this big evil villain character or play this quiet shy character, and just the ability to shift, it's shape shifting into these different characters.
Sure. Right.
It's incredible, it really is. So those 2 immediately come to mind, and then, you know, of course, my coaches all inspire me every single day, because 'cause they're incredible. Um, all of the characters, or all of the voice actors that, play characters in Critical Role, Matt Mercer. Give me 1 second, I'm sorry.
Beep, 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 beep,
I'm
beep.
getting a spam risk call. I'm half
Oh,
tempted to answer it and put on my character voice.
yeah, I'm familiar with those calls. I get them 1,000 times a day.
Yes. They probably just want my money, but, you know.
Sure. Yeah, we're all familiar with those.
Yes. Um, but yeah, I mean, there, like I said, there's a list, I could go on and on. The cast of Critical Role, Laura Bailey, Travis Willingham, Sam Riegel, they're all phenomenal. Those are my top inspirations for sure. Um, but I find new people every day that inspire me, that I'm like, "Oh, I love that voice that they played in this new show I just watched," and then I've gotten to a point where anything and everything that I watch, I analyze the voices. I listen to how they say their lines, how they act, as far as alongside the character movement, the emotions that they portray, everything I analyze, even commercials, I do the same thing. I listen to all the commercials. I don't skip them on Spotify. I listen to all of them because it's so interesting to hear different takes. And even if I hear one and I'm like, oh, I would have never thought to say it that way. I would have done it this way. Um, and obviously, I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying like, oh, that's such an interesting outlook on how to read that script.
Sure.
Um, it's really cool. So I find inspirations in everything. Um, and
That's
even just my peers that work alongside me, my team, I work for, a team called JMC Demos. They're one of the biggest demo production companies in the industry, and so I have we're a small team, there's probably 6 or 7 of us, and they inspire me every day, just the amount of dedication, the amount of hard work, the amount of, just goodness that they put out into the industry. The voice acting community is so wonderful and so supportive, and it just
that's awesome.
yeah, it inspires me not only to be good at what I do, but to be a good person, and it's great.
That's awesome. Um, yeah, it's always nice to like, dive headfirst into something that you found as either a crazy hobby that you'd like to make into a career one day, or just a career. And it's always great when you find that the backbone of that, quote unquote, society or whatever, the people that you converse with on a regular basis are actually nice. um
Yeah.
I found that the podcasting community, especially like the more indie podcasters, are a lot like that. Like a lot of people were asking me like why I ventured into subreddit. They're like, subreddit is like the largest dumpster fire on the interwebs. Like, why would you do that? And I'm like, because of the podcasters subreddit. Like,
Right.
it's just this. I mean, it's really the only quote unquote community of podcasters that I communicate with, or converse with. But like it's just a good place to go to like ask questions, because pretty much everyone there is in the exact same boat. No one's making boatloads of money off of their podcast. If they're making any money at all, it's more than likely from like their Patreon or something. um and so it's just a good place to go to, like, if you have an idea for something you want to do with your podcast, or if you're looking to get started into podcasting. It's so yeah, I found that too with podcasting. I'm not saying that podcasting is a career next to what you're doing, which is obviously what you do for money, but it is, a hope one day that the podcast will make me oodles and boodles of cash.
That's
So
the dream. You find what you love and hope that it, you know, carries you through life.
right, exactly. You were saying a few minutes ago about like these voice actors that have this incredible range where they can do, hundreds and hundreds of different voices, and on all these different shows. On the, I guess, the opposite or flip side of that, how do you feel about these actors that basically just have to use their voice, and it's the most recognizable voice of all time? You can pick it out of 1,000 voices, no problem. And they basically don't even really need to do anything to their voice to sound like, a different character. Like H. John Benjamin, who, he plays Archer in
Bob
Archer.
Burgers. Yes.
Um, there's Will. Is it Will? Not Will Arnett. Will, or no, it is Will Arnett that plays BoJack Horseman.
Yeah,
He
he plays, uh, I think he plays Lego Batman in the Lego movie as
yes.
well. Yeah, he's great, and he's been in a few things. I think I just watched a Studio Ghibli movie the other day that he was in that was fantastic.
Yeah. So I mean, I just wanted to get your opinion on those actors that don't. It seems like for the most part, maybe a little bit of fluctuation in intonation and whatnot. I don't know all the specialized vernacular, but it seems like for the most part they're just using their regular voice. And I was curious to see how you felt about that.
Yeah, I think there are people who have such unique voices that it works for them, you know, they don't have to change anything, they just get the character and they act, and, sometimes that's all it takes, you know,
Right.
they may not have to raise their voice or lower their voice or, you know, put on, like, some weird sound effects, sometimes that's all it takes is just acting a little bit differently, so, like, for Archer versus Bob's Burgers, same voice, but a little bit different as in terms of the way that they
Right.
act that out, you know? Um, and it works, it really does. I do not have the luxury of having that distinct voice, um,
Sure.
but no, I think it's great.
Yeah, I figured those kinds of voices like them and like James Earl Jones, like they're
Yes,
like one in a million. Like great if you have that voice, but know that you probably don't have it, which is fine.
sure.
Yeah. Um, how about some of the things that you love most about voice acting? For the several years you've been doing it thus far, what have you come to find that you love most about it?
Um, it's tough because I love everything about it.
That's great. Yeah, I
Um,
mean,
yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot that I could say that I don't necessarily like about it. A lot of it, you know, anytime that I get a script, anytime that I get an audition, um, you know, I might look at it for a few minutes and think of a few different ways that I could bring the script to life. But I think my favorite thing is getting to put my own personality into the world, um, and be a voice for stories, for characters, for brands.
mhm,
And, so anytime that I step in here and I press record, it's like I said, it's that euphoric feeling. Um, but also there's just so much camaraderie and networking amongst voice actors. And so I've made some lifelong friends through it. It's a lot of fun and you never ever stop learning.
right.
Like I said, I am constantly either coaching or I'm listening to a webinar or I'm, you know, obviously not last year, but I'm going to conferences.
Sure.
Um, you know, it's something that you can continuously grow in and there is no plateau unless you choose for there to be.
Right. Are you a Ravenclaw by chance?
I'm a Slytherin actually.
Really? Okay.
Believe it or not, and those people don't believe that, but I am. I've taken the
That's
test like 40 times.
that's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't have necessarily like hardcore pegged you for a Slytherin, but I mean, I I feel like Ravenclaws and Slytherins like kind of go hand in hands. Like,
Sure.
um, I know we're not necessarily talking about Harry Potter right now, but like
No,
you
I love Harry
kept
Potter, it's great.
right. I mean, because duh. But like, you kept on mentioning things like it being a lifelong learning process, and you're never plateauing. You're just always like it evolves, just like so many other, um, entertainment sub communities, so there's always new things to learn and keep up with. And you seemed very enthusiastic about that. And I'm always wanting to learn new things, especially combined with like my ADHD brain is just like, ooh, let's do that, ooh, that, ooh, that. Which is why I ended up spending like $50,000 in student loans because I could not figure out what
You
I
can't
wanted to
decide, yeah,
do.
absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, that's and again you mentioned that the voiceover or voice acting community being so supportive of one another. Like I I probably wouldn't have guessed that, because I feel like you hear a lot of stories. Granted, it's through like TV and movies, but you hear about regular, I don't know what you want to call it, in person acting, not voice acting, just being in movies and TV. Like it's basically a zero sum game. Like you can be supportive of one another, but like if you get that role, like your friend that may be auditioning for that role as well doesn't get that role. So like at the end of the day, you prevented someone from getting a job. Um, so like it's cool to hear that like this is it's still an acting community, but everyone is like very supportive of one another. It's very cool to hear.
It's really great. I see people all the time. They're like, "Oh, I auditioned for that. I didn't book it, but I am so glad you did." And they are genuinely so happy about it. It's not like they're just
Wow.
saying that like, "Oh, I wish I would have booked that."
Sure.
And there is I mean, we're all human. There is sometimes there's some letdown, "Oh, man, I really wish I would have booked that, but I'm so glad, my friend did." And the cool thing about voice acting too is we don't have to worry about what we look like. We're all in our booths. We're
Mhm.
not being judged by people who are watching us on screen because nobody ever sees us. And that's kind of the joy of being a voice actor is we're
Sure.
not judged on our appearance. We're judged on purely our ability to act and being the right voice for the project. And that's another thing too is I might audition alongside a friend of mine and we both had amazing auditions, but one of us books it because they just liked that voice better. And it might not have been because the other person had a bad audition. It might
Mhm.
just be that my voice fit or their voice fit better within the realm of what those casting directors were looking for. So it's
Sure.
not always, oh, you're a really bad voice actor. It's we just think this works better for our brand or for our character, or this is what I imagined before, you know, it's the little things. It's not always, a
Right.
bad audition. Mhm.
Yeah, it's kind of like going back to that old, like, it's only business, or it's just business. When you usually hear that brought up in like really crappy situations. So like when someone gets let go from a job, be like, don't take it personally. It's just business. But like it sounds like that's kind of the case as well, for those situations where it's kind of like this mutual respect where if you don't get a job, because they pass you over for maybe a friend or a colleague of yours, that's it's not a knock on you necessarily. It's just that their voice fit better for the character that they're casting for. So
Exactly. Mhm.
yeah. Um so we mentioned a lot of things that you really enjoy about voice acting, which, like as you said, is pretty much everything. It seemed like you don't really have too many or any dislikes, or feel like there's any downsides to voice acting. Is that the case? Is there like any little things that you're like, oh, I wish I could change this, or this is kind of a pain in the ass? Is there anything like that?
I wouldn't say so much there are things that I dislike. I would say sometimes there are things that are inconvenient, like when you get an
Sure.
audition and it's due in an hour and you're doing something else. That's
Oh.
sometimes a challenge. Yeah. It's like, "Hey, rush audition, it's due in an hour," and I'm in the middle of a session. I'm like, "Oh, no, I'm not gonna be able to audition for that one, but I really want to." I would say
Wow.
that probably one of the most challenging things, um, and really just staying on task. I mean, voiceover is such a demanding career.
Mhm.
80% of it is auditioning and marketing, and the other 20% is actually doing work. So I think,
Mhm.
when people are ask me, they're like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "I'm a voice actor." They think I stand here all day and I record work and I send it out. Not the case. Most of my job is standing here recording auditions and sending them to my agent. Or
Right.
I'm doing my own marketing. I'm sending out emails. I'm, researching new people to reach out to. Um, so I would say it's not something I necessarily dislike, but it's something I need to be better at is just making a schedule to set aside time for myself because I never take a break. Um,
Yep.
but B, just to make sure that I am not being scatterbrained and I get the most productivity that I can from myself.
Right.
So yeah, other than that, I mean, a lot of it is just you never know when a really big audition is gonna come through that you may or may not have time to get in because you're doing other things.
Mhm.
Um, and then, there's a lot of improv that happens. You
Sure.
might, get an audition that you're like, "Oh, I don't really know if this is me," and you have to come up with something on the spot, or you might get into a session and your casting director, is like, "Hey, we want something totally different, and you have to come up with a different character other than what you auditioned with, because maybe they just wanna see what you can do." So I think that's not something I dislike, it's just the most challenging thing that I would say. Um, and then just, having some type of knowledge of audio processing and editing and, um, audio workspaces and soundproofing. It's
Sure.
a lot of stuff that, like I said, you're constantly learning, and that's definitely not a downside, but it's something that you have to keep up with the trends and the times, and it's something that's ever evolving.
Right. Yeah. So I've heard one of your favorite questions to answer is what's the best microphone to get?
It's my favorite question.
Said no one ever.
Right. It's actually one of the most I every day that I log into Facebook, somebody is asking, not me personally, but, posting like, "What microphone should I get?" And the answer is whichever one works for you.
Right.
I will say that don't buy a USB microphone. Just don't do it.
Wow.
Unless
Okay.
you are doing, like for podcasting or something, it's fine. If you're just starting and you haven't booked any work yet and it's, what you can afford at the time, okay. But for professional voice acting, the XLR cable,
Hmm.
those microphones are what's going to be the best for you.
Yeah.
But every microphone sounds different for every voice. Like you might get a microphone that sounds like $1,000,000 on one voice, and then it sounds like you shouted into a 10 trash can for another voice. It really just depends. It really does.
Y- Yeah, I've always used like since the beginning of the podcast, I've always used XLR mics. Like I I think I've talked about this a couple times on the show, but when I was getting ready to start podcasting, like it was still kind of like I think I want to do it, but like there, at the time podcasting was still like a little bit of an investment, where like right now, really, you could just record off of your laptop mic if you want to. Um,
Right.
like I wanted to go in relatively strong and Christmas was coming up. So I just asked like, hey, everyone, if you're planning on getting me gifts, like either money or like recording equipment, please and thank you. And so I was lucky enough to start off, pretty strong as far as hardware goes. And so I started out with like all XLR mics and, I have a, cool Yamaha, um, sound mixer and stuff. So yeah, I definitely second vote XLR mics. Like you said, USB. That's great if you're starting out. You can get some really great cheap USB microphones, but you can also get some great XLR microphones that are pretty cheap. Like my Audio Technica was, I think, about $100 or so, um,
Sure.
which is a great price. Um, for run of the mill microphone that does a decent job. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, the biggest downfall with using USB microphones is they are solely powered through whatever you plug it into. So if you're plugging it
mhm,
directly into a laptop or computer, you're gonna get some kind of feedback in there, even if you may not notice it right away, there is some kind of feedback, but also the power source is being powered through your computer.
right.
So it's much better quality to use the XLR, through an interface.
Yeah. My co-host Ted, which everyone's familiar with, you're familiar with, recently his Blue Yeti USB microphone crapped out, and of course he was just going straight into his computer like you just mentioned. But like I said, it crapped out, and so but I had, lucky enough, I had three extras, so I gave him one of my XLR mics, and I gave him like this M Audio Fast Track, like little mini interface that is of course USB, goes into the computer, but it's also phantom powered and has the XLR port. And we notice a significant change in his vocals, and the sound of his vocals. I mean, he sounds great by default. Like he has this very
He has one of
low
those voices.
baritone. Yeah, it's just very sultry. Like Ted, I'd love to have your voice instead of being up here like Elmo. But yeah, that's kind of funny that you mentioned that, because when I lent him my microphone, we noticed this significant change in his audio quality on his end. So yeah, it's very
Good.
interesting. Um, so is we were kind of talking a little bit about this before we hit record. Are there any exercises that you do either on a regular basis? And or like right before you start either a session for an actual job, or if you're going to be practicing, or what have you? Is there anything you do on a fairly regular basis to kind of keep your instrument in check, if you will?
I'm my biggest thing is just staying hydrated. That's the biggest thing.
Okay.
If I'm feeling even a little bit dehydrated, I'll get a sticky mouth. I'll get a lot of mouth noise come through in my auditions, and those are really hard to edit out.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of them.
Staying
Yeah,
hydrated is just great life advice,
it
anyways.
really is. It makes you feel better. It really does. I feel like it keeps me fueled throughout the day. If I'm hydrated, I feel better. Um, but yeah, I do avoid dairy. Dairy is one thing that it creates a lot of phlegm in the back of the throat. So
Hmm.
I don't drink any kind of milk other than like almond or coconut. I do like cheese. That's a really hard thing for me.
Hmm. I love cheese
But if
as
I
well.
know I'm about to record, I don't eat anything that's gonna have dairy in it because it does create that phlegminess back there, and so I'll be clearing my throat my entire session.
Sure.
Um, so as far as, like, health stuff, I would say that's the best thing. As far as warm-ups, I just make sure that I get my mouth really just relaxed. There's a couple of really cool exercises. I mean, you can Google them, YouTube them. If you just search, like, singing warm-ups, those are some of the best ones. I just make sure that I really stretch out all those mouth muscles. I'll do, like, lip trills, like,
Hmm.
um and that just kinda helps to loosen everything up, not only in my mouth, but my jaw and my throat. And then I just kinda, like, shake out my whole body. Like, if I'm tense, then my voice sounds tense. So if I
Sure.
especially if I'm going to record a character, I'll do jumping jacks or I'll, like, wiggle around like one of those, the noodles that are in front of, like, car dealership.
Crazy
Yeah.
wacky inflatable flailing arm flailing tube
That
man.
one, yes. Yeah, so I just kinda, like, wiggle everything out, when I'm getting ready to go record a session because it helps me kinda get into the mode. I also like to put on, like, some kinda cool, um, like, song or music or something that just kinda gets me hyped up if I'm going in for something that's high energy. Now, if I'm going in for
Sure.
something that's, like, really sad or depressing, then I just think about really sad things.
Right.
Um,
Just all the emo music from like the
yes,
early 2000s.
it's
Right.
those are the best. I miss those days.
Yeah, just Taking Back Sunday and My Chemical Romance and Fall
Yes.
Out Boy, just all kinds of
All of
people
it.
getting their heart broken, 24/7,
Exactly.
right.
But yeah, no, as far as, like, staying hydrated, I do drink tea, avoid dairy, and then just getting your mind and your body in the right place. Like, a lot of voice acting, if you're healthy and you are it's kinda like sports, like, athletes train and work out. If you are healthy, in your mind and your body, it helps. Like, I know that sounds silly because all we're doing is, talking and acting, but it
Right.
helps.
Yeah, it's all connected. It's not like your brain is away from the rest of your body. Like it's not detached. Like it's all interconnected. It all works together. Like like you said, people can sometimes tend to separate things and be like, well, why would my mental health dictate like how flimsy or not flimsy my arms are feeling right now? Well, but
Sure.
like it really is all interconnected. And so taking care of your mental health will take care of your physical health, will take care of your mental health. It's, this,
Absolutely. It's a circle. It really
yes,
is. It's an
it's
ever
the
evolving circle.
circle of life.
Yes.
Ah, Geez. Okay. Sorry. If I could do that at least once a podcast, I would be a happy man. But
I
this is
think you
probably
should open with that.
yeah. Ted would not have that nonsense at all, which is why I'm glad I get to do these episodes occasionally where I get to be a little bit more silly than usual. But anyways, so let's see. We mentioned, I think, one or two misconceptions a little earlier in the recording. Were there any other misconceptions that you can think of, like from the, I guess, quote unquote, general public, people that are either looking to get into voice acting or just kind of look at voice acting as an outsider that you found people think this way and it's really this way?
I think the biggest thing that I see, when people come to me specifically and they're like, "Hey, how did you start this? I wanna do it too."
Mhm.
And I am all about supporting people in their dreams. But there's also, there's not a right or wrong way necessarily for everyone to go about it. But there is certainly some not so highly looked upon ways.
Sure.
um, so the first place, like if you are thinking about being a voice actor, the first thing I think you should do is to meet with a coach and find out if you can
Any
do it.
good?
Yeah,
Yeah.
get a consultation, get an evaluation. A good coach will walk you through a variety of different scripts, different sounds, different intonations, different attitudes, and that will kind of help determine where you are and if you're great already and we should get you into some coaching so you can start auditioning. B,
Mhm.
if you have the potential, we really need to work on it. Or C, maybe you should find a different choice. Because it happens. But a lot of people, again, think that they need to go out and they need to buy all this equipment and then they need to start coaching or not coach at all. And that is the biggest mistake you can make in voice acting, is not getting a coach. I've had a
Right.
lot of people that have come to me and they're like, "Hey, I wanna be a voice actor. What should I do?" And I'm like, "Well, hey, I would love to help you. Here's a list of really good coaches that I can refer you to. This is what I did to get started."
Mhm.
And a lot of them come back to me and they're like, "Oh, I don't wanna start coaching. I just wanna start auditioning." And I'm like, "It doesn't work that
No,
way."
right.
Because the reality of it is becoming a voice actor, is doing voiceover, it's an investment. It's a career investment. It's a
Mhm.
life-term investment, and it's not something that you can go cheap on. It's not something that you can, just skimp on and say, "Hey, I'm not gonna get a coach. I'm just gonna start doing it." Um,
Right.
because you gotta think, you're gonna pay, most coaching ranges anywhere from $150 to $300 an hour for the top range ones.
Mhm.
And you're gonna need quite a few hours of coaching. And then, that's not even talking about equipment. I mean, equipment we could talk about all day long.
Right.
But then, conferences, your DAW, like I use Logic Pro, that's $200 right off the bat.
Uh-huh.
Your laptop, some people use casting sites. You pay subscriptions for that. You're gonna need a website. You're gonna have to pay a web designer. You're gonna have to pay, the services of the website. There's so many things that go financially into it.
Mhm.
But it's also hours and hours of training and practicing, and it's really a dedicated thing. And I think a lot of people, say, "Oh, voice acting, that sounds like fun. I want to do it." I'm like, "Great. Here's all the things that you're gonna, have to look forward to." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, never mind." I've run
Yeah.
into that a lot, and like I said, I am here to support anyone in their dream, but I do come with a disclaimer that it is a highly it's an investment, like, right off the
Right.
bat, it is. It's
You're
it's a career.
Yeah, you're gonna have to go hard in the paint if you wanna make it in the industry because, it requires your full dedication.
Sure, and, it's a lot of people think that they can go cheap. They're like, "I'm gonna make my own website, make my own demos, do everything myself so that it's
Mhm.
not costing me 2 to $3,000 for one demo," which I could go on a whole tangent about that too. Um, don't make your own demos, please. Um, a lot of, what you're paying for is experience. Whether it be having a demo produced, having a website created, a lot of it is people who have already worked in the industry, know what they're doing, know what they're listening for, know what you sound like and how to, copyright script for you, or how to brand you on your website, how to write SEO. There's so much that goes into it that a lot of people don't see.
Mhm.
And they're like, "Oh, I'll just do it myself." Which, again, is wishy-washy. I wouldn't suggest it if you want to be taken seriously as a professional.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, I've actually tossed around the idea. This is something I really want to do for the podcast, but have like a I don't know what I'm gonna call it yet. The working title is like a an artist appreciation month because I've been on both the artist end where I make stuff. I'm a creator, but I'm also on the consumer side where I like buying other people's work, and all too often I see instances of like people they're like, hey, can I get a price quote for this or whatever? They want a homemade handmade notebook made, or they want a 30-second voiceover clip, and that person comes back with a price quote and they're like, holy shit, like I didn't realize it was going to be $5,000.
Right.
And so my idea was to have like a month of episodes where I get together with these different artists, to give them a platform to talk about their process and what they do and why their services cost these many dollars.
Yeah,
Because
no, and I appreciate that. You're right. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, you're perfect.
I'm very passionate about this.
Hmm.
Even
That's
just
great.
being a voice actor has made me appreciate, artists, freelancers so much more because I know what it's like to, I've bought all my equipment, I've put all my hours into coaching. And like you said, a notebook. How long did it take you to learn how to create that notebook?
Hmm.
What did the materials cost you? How much time did it take you?
Yep.
So they just
Yep.
look at it and they're like, oh, I can buy that from Walmart for $12.
Right.
Well, that
Then
was made
go
on the
go to
machine.
Walmart then.
Right, absolutely. I bought a lot of, like, stickers and pieces of art off of Etsy for Christmas gifts this year, and a lot of it, I
That's
looked
great.
at.
Thank you for
Yeah,
doing that, by the way.
yeah,
I mean,
I did,
it wasn't from
absolutely.
me, granted, which
Well, you should send me your shop link.
yeah, yeah, that I mean, I was saying that for those people that you purchase from, because I'm sure they appreciate you shopping from them, uh, rather than Amazon or Walmart or whatever. So,
Sure. Yeah, and a lot of it, it makes you reflect more on what those are, how much time they spent on that, what materials they used, even if
mhm,
it's as a digital artist, how much did their iPad cost them? How much did Procreate cost them? How much did that Apple Pencil cost them? That's
mhm,
a lot of things that people don't see, even, with voice acting. People might ask for a quote on a voiceover, and I'll be like, well, hey, this is gonna cost you, $2,000. And you're like, no. And I'm like, well, what you don't understand is my microphone alone cost $1,000.
mhm,
So not only that, you have to pay for my internet. You have to pay for, like, I have to eat. I
right,
have to pay rent. There's things that people don't understand that they're paying for. They just think, oh, this is only, X amount of words. Why am I paying this dollar amount for it? When
right,
the reality is they're paying for A, your experience, B, your equipment, but also, I mean, they could go to one of the he who shall not be named websites and pay $5 for a voiceover, but is it going to be professional? Probably
sure.
not.
If
Um,
it's for
and
$5, then probably you are
yeah,
right. Probably not.
right.
Yeah.
But too with voiceover, you pay for usage. So if I get a commercial and it is a TV spot that is airing only in the city of Nashville, but then I get a commercial that is, maybe they're both 30-second commercials, so they're very short. It's not going to take me long to record, but this other commercial is recording nationally to everyone across the United States.
Mhm,
That commercial is going to pay triple, if not way more, than the one that's only airing in one city. So a lot of it comes down to usage, along with the session fee. So if they want to direct you in the session, if it also depends on the genre. So if you're doing commercials, if you're doing e-learning, if you're doing medical narration is sometimes very technical to read, so that they're
mhm.
gonna charge more for that.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's something that a lot of people don't understand, and so being a voice actor has created a lot, not that I didn't respect them before, but a lot of respect for freelancers, for independent artists, for musicians, for all of those art forms.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Like, you know, just a second ago and a while back, you were talking about, some of the things with voice acting that's like the tip of the iceberg versus everything else that goes on, and how that's another kind of misconception between people that aren't really in the biz. Is that your time in front of the microphone is that proverbial tip of the iceberg, and it's basically the same with podcasting. Like, you know uh, people want to get into podcasting, and a couple people have come to me and be like, hey, you've been doing it for several years now, like what am I getting myself into if I want to do this? And I'm like, well, first of all, you got to know that your time in front of the microphone is the tip of the iceberg. Like, that proverbial tip, because there's, like you mentioned, there's networking. I mean, the networking side of podcasting is like so incredibly different than what anyone would possibly think. Like social media is basically the last place that you should be sitting in, if you're looking to get your podcast heard, by talking to people on the internet. But like, just like you said, there's so many other things that goes into the process that's not sitting in front of the microphone and talking into it and recording. And yeah, it's definitely a plan of mine to do that series of episodes. And if possible, I'd love to have you back for to go a little bit more in depth into those talking points, because I really think that we could do some good there, and maybe try
Yeah,
and market those episodes to those people that um would like to learn a little bit more about what goes into that, the creative process behind making your epoxy tumblers that you buy on Etsy, or the temporary tattoos or stickers, or what have you, that are made by independent artists. So yeah, I think that,
absolutely.
yeah. But anyways, pushing forward off of our soapboxes, at least for a minute. Um, so we did get or actually, before we dive into some career advice, and we did get some fan questions on Facebook, in our Facebook group. But were there any lessons that you learned the hard way, or just lessons in general, ones that maybe you haven't spoken about up until this point, when you dove into the voice acting realm?
I think the biggest learning curve is how to negotiate. So you might get a job that comes through, from a client, direct contact. This doesn't typically happen through agents or um, managers, whoever, if you have an agent or a manager. But if you have a direct client that comes to you with a job, you have to know how to negotiate a fair rate for yourself.
Sure.
And sometimes that's really hard because they might come to you and they might offer you, $200 for a $2,000 job. And, it's something that you have to learn how to say no. And I think that's been the hardest thing for me, is because I
Oh
am
man.
definitely a yes person.
Oh yes.
Um, and I'm
Yes.
really bad about it, but I don't accept things that are so far below what we consider fair rates in our industry, because A, it's not doing myself any favors. B, if that client comes back, with 10 more jobs at this low rate, I could be
Hmm.
doing other auditions making, way more money.
Hmm.
Um, you know, what at the end of the day, I have to look at it and see how much time is this taking doing this low budget job, that I could be spending that time doing other auditions to make jobs that are fair rates for me. So I think a lot of it is how you spend your time, but also negotiating, learning how to say, "Hey, this is what I charge. This is what's fair. This is how many words you have. This is how you're spending your usage," and being okay with losing that job if they're not going to budge.
Hmm.
If they come out of the gates, $200 or nothing, and that job is worth at least 2,000, if not more,
Hmm.
it's okay to say no. It's okay to, obviously you don't wanna be nasty to them, you don't wanna be ugly to them, but it's okay to explain to them why you can't do this job, or, what your standards are, what your fair rates are. And I think that's been a hard thing for me. I'm much better about it now, but my first 2 years, I didn't wanna say no to a lot of things because I was like, "This is work, this is, it's gonna pay my bills." But I'm not
Right.
doing myself any favors by accepting those, and I'm not doing the industry any favors by accepting those, because then that client might go to another talent and, same thing's gonna happen. So it is okay to kindly educate people about what we do, like we're talking now, talking about, what goes into voice acting. So
Hmm.
there have been several instances over the past year where I've turned down jobs because they just didn't. There was no negotiation. Like I tried to negotiate, and it just wasn't it wasn't in the cards, and that was
Sure.
okay. But then later, that same client would come back to me maybe a few months later, even a year later, and they would have a job for me that's fair rate because of how polite I was to them, how kind I was to them. It is okay to say no, and I think that is the hardest thing I've had to learn.
Yeah. No, I 100% get that, because very similar things, obviously not with voice acting, because not that's not the gig that I'm in, but um I'm very much a yes person too. So my knee jerk reaction always is yes, like I will do that for you. And then you give me like 5 minutes and I'm like, fuck, like I should not have agreed to that. Um, but you mentioned something that uh, made me want to ask, to make sure that you're not being, like, I guess, taken advantage of, like someone's trying to lowball you with a job. Like, what what would you tend to do, like, early on in your career? Like, do you have certain people to go to be like, hey, am I getting lowballed here with this job that's trying to pay me $200 when really it's worth $2,000? Or was there a community that you went to, or did you actually have an agent at that point?
I do. So I do have an agent, and there have been a few times when I will have a client come to me and I will ask her. I do have 2 or 3 people, that are close to me that I trust and I know are always looking out for my best interests. I'll go to them and I'll say, "Hey, what do you think about this?"
Mhm.
There are also several resources out there, that work to provide rate guides. So the Global Voice Acting Academy is the one I typically go for. Gravy for the Brain is another one. There's several resources out there that are committees that are constantly putting together these guides for what fair rates are in the industry, and it does change. There are occasionally, you might get a commercial for a mom and pop shop that's not a corporate business, and you might do something that's a little bit um under the budget, and that's okay. I'm not saying that you should never do those things. It's a
Sure.
lot of it is it's situational. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, those like Gravy for the Brain and the Global Voice Acting Academy, those ones are really good guides to kind of base your rates off of, and it's a really good idea to also create a rate card for yourself just so you can, if somebody asks for it, you can send it, but just so you have a minimum of what you're willing to accept.
Okay.
Um, so yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. So let's dive into a couple quick questions that we had from our fans from Facebook. So a couple people were asking about, like, getting started in voice acting. Um, they were inquiring about agents and auditions, like if you know have to have one. Do you need one? um so and I know that we've kind of touched on a lot of these, um just intermittently, as the issues have popped up during our recording already. But if you just want to highlight some of the things regarding getting started, like, and specifically for agents and auditioning and whatnot.
Yeah. So agents should not be an immediate focus when you're getting started. I think agents are definitely a necessity down the road. But when you're first starting out, your main focus, as far as once you've been through the coaching, all of that, um, your main focus should be direct marketing. You should be marketing to clients. You should be booking your own work. And I could give you a whole lot of information about that too, but there
Mhm.
are a lot of people who are way smarter than me that I would refer you to learn how to market yourself.
Sure.
Um, but my first 2 years, I spent direct marketing to clients, and that's how I booked my work. Was I worked directly with production houses, with companies, and that's where you should start, because before you get signed on with an agency, they want to know that you can book work. They want to
Hmm.
know that you are capable of booking jobs. They want to hear what you can do.
Okay.
They want you to have a little bit of a repertoire behind you before they sign you on. Because if they sign you on and you're not bookable, then what was the point of them signing you on? You know?
Right. Yeah, that actually makes sense and kind of bridges that gap of, like, how do you get experience when before you have experience. You know, that the whole, classic catch 22. So that actually makes a lot of sense and helps bridge that gap a little bit, I feel like.
Sure. And I mean, there's other ways too. Like it's the pay to play websites, like there's so many of them nowadays. There's, voices.com, there's Voice123, there's Bidalgo, there's voiceovers. There's so many different ones. I personally do not participate in those as of right
Mhm.
now. I have looked into them to see, which one is going to suit me best. But there are websites that you pay to be a member of, and auditions will come through.
Sure.
Now, whether you book through there, a lot of it really just depends on A, how quick you are to audition, B, how good your audition is. Um, so you can get auditions that way as well. But yeah, agents are something that is later in your career. I just got my first agent last summer in July.
Okay.
July, I believe. Yeah, so I haven't quite been with her quite a year. But she sends me auditions just about every day. And
Oh, wow.
as long as it's fitting for me. Now sometimes I'll get some that are I'm like, "Oh, that's not me. That's not my voice."
Mhm.
Or she'll send one that's, you have to be bilingual or you have to be of a certain ethnicity. I pass on all those because that's not me. And that's an important thing too, is when you have an agent, A, you're giving them your best work, but don't audition for things. Just because they send you the audition does not mean you have to audition for it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, but that's cool that you finally got hooked up with, an agent. It seems like that they are getting a lot of work to. I mean, like, at least one audition a day seems like a lot. Like, I would get emails from recruiters. I mean, I still do, like, almost every day. Like, hey, David, are you in the job market looking for another developer, position? And I'm like, oh my god, like, please stop. Like, uh, so yeah, that's that. But in your case, I can assume that getting audition opportunities on a fairly frequent basis like that is a good thing, right?
absolutely. Yeah, it brings a lot of opportunity to the table. Um, because with an agent, a lot of those auditions I would have never been able to get without her.
Hmm.
Because I've got a lot of video game auditions from her, a lot of animation stuff as well. And those are things that those companies specifically go through casting directors who then send it to the agents. Um, so those auditions are ones that it's almost like your agent is the gatekeeper. So if you can
Right.
get booked on with an agent, that gives you the key to be able to have the opportunity to audition for it at all. Because without her, I would have never had that opportunity.
Sure.
Um, Now whether I book it or not, that depends on, how good I was there's lots of factors that go into that. Um, so yeah, I think it's important to have an agent, especially depending on what genre that you're getting into. But there's a lot of bigger, huge brands like, Coca-Cola, Starbucks, all the car companies. A lot of those go directly through agencies, and those are auditions that you would not necessarily be able to get on your own.
Okay. Cool. So, in terms of, like, just all jobs that are out there, what have you found to be like some of the most common jobs? And are there any that are, like, sought after the most, like, by the general public? I guess, so that's kind of a two-part question. I apologize.
No, that's okay. Again, there's a lot of work out there. There's so much. A lot of people think that the voice acting community is oversaturated right now because when COVID hit, everybody decided they wanted to be a voice actor.
Sure.
But it's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of work. And over the course of the last year, we've seen a lot of shifts in the industry. Um, so there's a lot of commercial stuff coming back because a lot of people needed hey, we're open for takeout when all the restaurants were closed, or
Hmm.
hey, we're here for you. I never want to hear the word unprecedented again.
Oh yeah, that
Unprecedented
one's been
times.
used a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. So, I wouldn't say that there's one that's necessarily more common to find work in. Um, Most of the industries that are bigger. I mean, there's a lot of e-learning right now because a lot of schools are virtual.
Mhm.
Um, or even, just what's the Duolingo, like similar
Oh,
things to
sure.
that, where you're learning a language or you're learning a new subject. There's a lot of e-learning stuff that goes into that.
Okay.
Medical narration is another thing as well. So you might have a new prescription that you just got put on, and you get this video teaching you like the side effects or how to take this medication. There's
Okay.
voice actors that teach you those things. And then of
That's
course there's
cool.
commercials. Yeah. There's so much. There's so many different genres of voiceover that people don't think about. When you call a hotel or when you call a restaurant and you get that automated message that's like press 2 to speak to a customer,
Right.
that's a voice actor. So telephony, political voiceover was huge last year because it was an election year. So a lot
Mhm.
of people were doing campaign voiceover.
Right.
Um, there's so much. So I wouldn't say that there's necessarily one genre that's bigger than the other. I find that, everybody wants to be in a Disney movie or everybody wants to be a cartoon character.
Right.
There are voice actors that don't do character work. There's some that just don't even look at it.
Right.
They're like, "I only want to do narration commercials." There's some voice actors that only wanna do audiobooks.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, there's so much work out there, but it's also so competitive because, like we were talking about before, you might audition for something and have 2 really great auditions against another person, but at the end of the day, they're gonna pick the one that stands out the most.
Mhm. This is actually something you said jogged a question in my mind that I wanted to ask you, um, but I didn't prepare for you in the notes, so I apologize in advance. Um, Regarding like audio books, like I've kind of always wondered exactly like how much prep goes into reading an audiobook. I'm sure it depends on the book itself, like the length and how complicated it is. Like obviously there's going to be a difference between Twilight and Game of Thrones. But like, just say a run of the mill, like 300-page fiction book. Like I always wondered like how much prep goes into that, and like the voice actor, like how long they spend in the booth, like total hours, because obviously you have to be there to read the book in its entirety. But I wasn't sure, exactly like if there's some behind the scenes stuff that goes on that I wouldn't have thought of that prolongs the process. Do you know anything about like the audiobook sector of voice acting?
I know a little bit. I typically stay away from audiobooks myself because
Okay.
I don't like to stand in the booth for a really long time.
Yeah, it
Um,
seems like that's kind of the situation.
yeah, I did actually I recorded my very first I only was in what, 1, 2 I think I was in 3 chapters of an audiobook, and it was for, a family friend, so
Okay.
it was something that I wanted to do.
Sure.
And she wrote the book. So we got the stuff. My boyfriend Sam and I, we both actually were characters in it. And the really cool thing about this book is it was an interview style. So it's like a science fiction, but your character is being interviewed. So it was a very different style. It's very conversational. It wasn't so much I wasn't a narrator. I was a character. And so for me it was very different than a typical audiobook would be. And I really enjoyed it. Of course, I went through and I read the chapters. I kind of figured out what was going on. I figured out my relationships to the other characters
Mhm.
and really just kind of went with it from there. Got my notes on, what kind of voice she was looking for in this character. And yeah, we recorded that. I think it's been 2 weeks ago now.
Okay.
So that was a lot of fun. But most of the time with audiobooks, um, people that from the outside looking in, don't let me, I'm not a professional audiobook reader. So,
Right.
um, but most of the time, they'll read the whole book from cover to cover, just so they know what all's in the book. They'll make notes of any different character voices. So if you have dialogue, they might change the voice for those characters. They'll make notes about any technical language. They'll make, just anything that's going to be useful for them to remember when they're reading the chapter. And then, most of the time they'll break the files up chapter by chapter. So they can take a break, but
Mhm.
also so it's easier. A lot of people will outsource editors as well. So if
Okay.
you have an audiobook that takes you 8 hours to read, they might then send that to an editor to, cut out any mouth noise or breaths or breaks or funny tummy grumblings or whatever comes up in there.
Right.
Um, so yeah, audiobooks are a beast that I do not have the willpower to necessarily do.
Right.
Um, it's a hefty thing, and more power to the people that do. I know some really amazing audiobook narrators.
Yeah.
Um,
No, one of my best friends, she just recently had her first book published under I think Simon and Schuster is the publisher,
okay,
and it was last fall, so 2019. And I purchased the physical copy when she did a in-person signing at the Barnes and Noble, actually in your neck of the woods in Franklin.
nice.
Um,
I love that one.
yeah, it's a good one. But I just recently drove up to South Carolina for a funeral, and I was like, this is a perfect opportunity to spend more money, which I'm hoping supports my friend. And I got the audiobook version to and listen to that basically the entire trip. And uh and that's kind of what got me thinking about a lot of those questions that I asked was like it seems like such a time commitment, and plus that voice actor was amazing. Like she did a fantastic job, and
Good.
just gave me like this whole brand new appreciation for voice actors. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a hefty beast.
Yeah, I figured as much. I mean, it's literally a book long, depending on the size of the book, but
Exactly.
it seems like it would be, if you take on a project like that, it would be a commitment, as far as the longevity, duration, etc. So, but we had one more fan question. And it was about accents and Southern accents in particular. She said that in the stuff that she's watched on TV and in movies with Southern accents, they basically that they're crap. And she hasn't really found too many Southern accents that have been really accurate to whatever region they're supposed to be portraying. They just kind of seem phony. So she was asking, like, do people like, I guess, agents or people looking to cast a role, do they look for people that can do accents? Do they look for people with like a natural accent sometimes, or is it a little bit of both, or can be both? So yeah.
I would say it's a 50-50 split. I've seen a lot more of them asking for authentic accents now. So
Okay.
if they're looking for, I see a lot of British accents or a lot of Spanish accents come through. They are looking for somebody who, is an English speaker but has that accent natively.
Sure.
I've seen a lot more of that just because it brings more of an authenticity to the table.
Right. Yeah.
But there's a lot of voice actors that I personally know that can do a really good,
Hmm.
New York accent or a really good, like New Orleans accent. There's some really good ones out there. And there's coaches that are dialect coaches that will actually train in how to do those accents.
Right.
Um, so it's 50-50. I've definitely heard my share of bad ones.
Sure.
But I've seen a lot more days. Casting directors are trying to cast authentic accents, which I think is great.
Right.
But there are some really good voice actors that can do both.
Sure. Yeah. When I was trying to figure out a way to structure this question, to ask you specifically, the only thing that I could think of was that episode of The Office where it's the murder mystery like game that they're all playing to keep their minds off. Do you know the episode I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and like Pam as like the Deb character is trying to do like the New Orleans Southern accent,
Right.
and he's like, "What you're doing is this Florida Panhandle when really you want this molasses coming out of your mouth." It just
Right,
cracked me
it
up.
is, it's the same thing, and, I think there's a certain level of study that needs to go in
For sure.
to those accents. You know, there is for the life of me, I cannot remember her name, and I feel so terrible.
Well,
But
you're
there
fired.
is, I know I'm so bad. There's, I watched her workshop back in May, I think last year at the One Voice conference, and she actually spent her several years of her life traveling to the entire world with a microphone and like recording equipment in the back of a van, recording people of certain dialects and different accents, and put together this entire collection of accents. And it's phenomenal. It's
Oh,
amazing.
wow.
So it's really cool. I am not an accent person. I can't do New York to save my life. It's not for me.
It's a
Occasionally
hard
I can.
one.
It is, and I think it's especially with, like, video game characters, if I'm doing, like, a Briti like, a they ask for a British accent as an alt.
Mhm.
They might say, "Hey, we imagine this person to have a neutral American accent, but maybe a British accent, we're not sure." I might give them a take of both. I might give them, you know, my neutral accent, and then I might give them, like, my take on British, and I'm not saying it's great.
Sure.
But if they specifically say I've seen a lot of character work lately that says, "Hey, we want somebody of Asian descent for this role. Hey, we want somebody of," I had one the other day that was, they wanted, like, a native Indian accent, and I think that's great. You know, I would never go out for auditions that specifically say, "Hey, we want somebody for this role." That is this ethnicity or is this accent or is this language. But if it's something that they, you know, an elf character, and they're like, "Hey, we don't really know what we want this elf to sound like, so can you just give us some of both?" You know, I might throw out like some kind of, you know, British accent, you know, that I would use in D&D or something. And I'm not
Right.
saying it's spot on. I would never use it against a British person.
Sure.
But you know, sometimes it's and sometimes they don't really know what they're looking for. So while they might not be looking for a neutral accent or a British accent, you might have kind of like this in between kind of voice that works for that character.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think a lot of it too depends on the backstory of the character too. You know, if they are for sure from, you know, a certain country, then they should probably sound like someone from that country. Now, if it's like a fantasy character and you know, have this cool voice that you can do that's like a mixed accent or like a not very good accent, like it might work for that character.
Wow. Okay. That's yeah, that's a lot of good information, and very good to know stuff. Um, and it's also cool to hear that, you know, people that are in the position of hiring voice actors, that they want a lot of times that genuine accents. I mean, you know,
Mhm.
of course there are so many great voice actors out there that can do so many different accents. And obviously that's fantastic, but you know, to have someone that happens to be a voice actor and they have that genuine, like, their native tongue is English, but they happen to have a, you know, a Spanish accent or a Hispanic accent or a British accent. I'm sure that, you know, is it seems like niche, but also like can be a pretty powerful tool in your tool bag, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you have to do what works for you. You know, like if you are, you know, like you said with the Southern accent, if you have a natural Southern accent and it is, you know, something that a casting director is looking for, like that's your role. That's your time to shine.
Sure.
Like that's where you fit in. And sometimes it is a niche thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, like I I trained myself how to speak High Valerian on Duolingo a couple years ago, and I
Wait,
haven't got to use it yet, but
what
that's
is
something
that?
that I'm like, "Hey, this is a niche thing."
Wait, did you say High Valerian?
Yes,
Okay,
like from Game of Thrones.
okay, yeah. For a second, I couldn't figure out what you said, but I was like, wait, I think I heard Valerian in there.
Yes,
I
yes,
was like, oh, you nerd.
yeah, out of all of the languages that I probably could have taught myself, you know, that would actually be useful, I was like, "No, I think this is a good one to learn."
Yeah,
Um, so
that
yeah, and, you know, obviously that's fun in games, but, you know, if you come from a certain country or a certain accent or, you know, you grew up around that, then that you can find a niche. Like, there's so like I said, there's so much work out there that you will find where you fit in and be so good at it that, you know, they're like, "Oh, that's the person that can do this accent spot on because they're from that country.
Right.
And even in the voiceover forums, a casting call might get posted and say, "Hey, we're looking for somebody with this very specific accent." I mean, it might be from I don't like a not very common accent, and voice actors will start tagging people that they know that are native to that place, and it's amazing the support that goes into trying to find authentic people to fill those roles. It's really great.
Sure. Does it ever happen, or sorry, does this ever happen where, like in that specific instance, someone will get tagged that's not even a voice actor, but just happens to fill out every single aspect of what they're looking for to cast for that character? The only thing that's missing is that them being an actual voice actor. Has that ever happened before?
Not particularly in terms of if they are most likely either an on-camera actor who
Okay.
could probably portray that through voice,
Okay.
or they might be a singer. They have some kind of experience to where, they could easily fill those shoes for that specific role.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, there was just a random question that I thought of. I was like, I wonder if anyone's gotten roped into that situation where they're like, "Hey, you have a great Southern accent, but have zero acting experience. Like, you want to come audition for it?" I don't know. It seemed like one of those like whimsical events that you Kramerically fall ass backwards into, and all of a sudden you're a voice actor. I don't know. But that goes to show exactly how much I know about the industry. But
There's a lot
I've
to know.
yeah, I've learned a lot during this podcast, which is a decent segue into some closing. Sorry, excuse me, closing thoughts. Um, Now, is there anything that we haven't touched on yet that you would like to discuss before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think that this has been very thorough, and I hope I've given some good insight.
Yeah,
I'm always happy to answer any questions or give advice. So, anybody that has a dream of being a voice actor or is just starting out and needs some recommendations for coaching, for education on marketing, I'm happy to provide those resources. Um, so yeah, I hope I've given a little bit of like, tip of the iceberg insight into to the beginnings of having a voiceover career.
yeah, absolutely. This has been great. Like all the information that you've given us. I mean, like I said, I've learned a metric shit ton, as they say, about it just in this hour and 45 minutes we've been recording. Um, and uh, I mean, this has been a blast. Like I've had so much fun with this podcast. Um, so yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Before we sign off completely, I told you about the closing segment that we usually do called "Shit That Doesn't Suck." Do you have something? Do you have something prepared?
I mean, I could talk about probably anything. It really I mean, I'm a nerd, so
Yeah, the last video game you played, the last comic book you read, the last show that you watched, whatever you want to pick, is cool with us. And like I said, it doesn't even really have to be nerd centric. It can be about anything. Just something that you'd like to recommend to our listeners that you have recently ingested into your brain.
hmm.
Do you want me to go first to give you time to think
I
about it?
I'll let you go first, and then I'll give you, like, a video game, a movie, and a comic, and I'll
Oh
let you choose,
boy, the hat
and
trick.
then I'll go on from there.
Okay, sure. So I think that this just came out on Netflix. I think it was just last week, maybe last weekend. But it's the history of swear words, hosted by
Yes,
Nicolas
Nicolas Cage,
Cage.
yeah.
Have you watched it yet?
I haven't watched it, but I keep seeing the ads for it, and it looks hilarious.
Yeah. So I'm into. I think I'm at the fourth or fifth episode. It's your typical Netflix fare for the most part, but like don't perceive that as like, oh well, I shouldn't watch it. Like obviously, I'm talking about it, so I recommend it. Um, but it is hilarious. Like, the episodes are short, they're like 25, 30 minutes, and each episode is dedicated appropriately to one swear word, and they open up the show with the word fuck. Uh, and it's, I mean, it's hysterical. They get a lot of like other actors and comedians to come in and talk about that word, and they actually get people that worked at like Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and like archivists and linguistic anthropology people to like talk about the origins of words and the history behind them. So it's like this really fun alternative history course combined into 30 minutes about one super incredibly niche topic.
I love that.
And plus it's about swear words. And
It makes it even
yeah,
better.
and they're my favorite words to use. Uh,
Yes.
Especially fuck, because it is so incredibly versatile.
You can
But
use it in front of anything and it makes sense.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, like I said, I think it's called the History of Swear Words, hosted by Nicolas Cage. It's a great one. So yeah, go check it out. So.
I certainly will. I'm gonna have to watch that. It's gonna go on my list of
Mhm.
thousands of things that I need to watch.
Yeah, we all have those.
Yes.
Mine is it only gets longer, never shorter. So yeah. But
Yeah.
anyways, so what did you decide on?
Well, I've been a video gamer since I was 4.
Mhm.
I played on the Super Nintendo when I was teeny weeny.
Hell yeah.
Yes, and, my very first memory of a video game was, I came home from school one day. I was actually 7 at this point, and, my dad was playing Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time.
Nice.
Um, and that's I remember sitting down and watching him play and just falling in love with the game, and that's the very first game that I remember falling in love with and being so immersed in. And so, Zelda's been a part of my life since I was very small. And so, Breath of the Wild's been out for almost 4 years now. It came out in 2017, which is
Wow.
crazy to think about.
Yeah, it's
Um
crazy that it's been around for that long already.
I know, I'm, crossing my fingers that Nintendo, please, 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 Nintendo, talks about the sequel soon.
Right, yeah.
Nintendo, if you're listening.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we picked up Age of Calamity, which is the Hyrule Warriors. I don't know if you're into the Zelda franchise at all.
A little
Um
bit. I know enough to, like, hold a 3-minute conversation about Zelda. Most of that, it would be me talking about how much I don't know about Zelda, but granted, I'd be
Fair.
talking about Zelda, so
Um, so Breath of the Wild is kind of if you put it on the timeline, I think it's the very first thing in the timeline, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure it begins the timeline.
okay.
Um, but Breath of the Wild was such a revolutionary game for the franchise because, every other game up to this point has been very linear. It's been very, "Hey, go to this dungeon, and then you get this weapon so you can go to the next place." It's been very linear, like, you have to do what the game tells you to do. Whereas with Breath of the Wild, it's such an immersive game, and you can go anywhere the second you start the game. Like, it's like,
Mhm.
"Alright, here you go. Here's this big, beautiful world for you to go and do whatever you want," and Link can climb, Link can jump. Your weapons will actually break in this game. You have to collect resources to cook food. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful game.
Yeah. I I've
So and
I've seen some gameplay firsthand. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's
Um,
okay.
I have been to, some friends' houses where that they have a Switch, and they've been playing the game, so, yeah, you're correct. It is very beautiful.
It's fantastic, and, I think the reason that I thought about it is, A, we've been playing it a lot. Sam actually just beat the Trial of the Sword last night, which is, extremely difficult to beat, and, I screamed just inside a little bit because I haven't had the chance to beat it. I can't do it, it's too hard for me. Um, so I was, like, rooting him on, but also a little bit jealous, and so,
Right.
we've been really into this is our second time playing through Breath of the Wild, but, we also played Age of Calamity, which is very different than a general Zelda game because it's more of the Dynasty Warriors hack and slash style.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was really, really good. Compared to the previous Hyrule Warriors that they put out, I felt like this one, not only did it give a prequel story to Breath of the Wild and to what was going on, um, it was a lot of fun gameplay. Every character had very unique fighting styles. You actually had boss fights on the fields that was very cool. You might have had like a big guardian pop up, and like a Hinox might pop up. There was really cool things that throughout the game, but also too, you get to see maybe in your little bit of seeing your friends play on the Switch,
Mm,
Breath of the Wild is very much everything is destroyed. Everything is in ruins. It's nothing is still standing except for like bits and pieces of the castle and some of the villages.
sure.
But in Age of Calamity, it's everything is it's before the calamity hits. So you actually get to see all the villages. You get to see Castletown. You get to see like the citadels. It's amazing.
Oh
And
wow.
so it's you see this beautiful map before it was destroyed, and it was just a really fun thing to see everything still standing, but also how devastating the war actually was because you're fighting like hordes and hordes of enemies.
Sure.
And so it's really cool. It was a very interesting story, and it put without giving any spoilers, it puts a very big wrench in the storyline. So I'm
Okay.
interested to see what happens with the sequel now because I'm like, my mind was completely blown.
Right. Yeah. That sounds awesome. And very overwhelming. I wish I had the time to get my hands.
It's a lot. I think when I checked my game, I had like 300 hours into the
Holy
game.
shit. Oh,
Now, granted, it's been out since 2017, and I got it on day one, like got the
sure.
collector's edition. um, but it's a lot. But definitely recommend, even if you're not a Dynasty Warriors fan, if you're a Zelda fan,
Mm.
Age of Calamity is absolutely worth picking up.
Yeah, I love Dynasty Warriors because it's I am a simple man, and Dynasty Warriors is a simple concept. You go in with a
You press
weapon.
buttons.
Yeah, it's just button mashing. It's like the realm of video gaming where button mashing is celebrated because that's
Yes.
all you gotta do. Like I remember the first time I was in high school, and I talked about this on the podcast a lot. I'm the poster boy of a casual video gamer, and this game was perfect for me. He was like, "Hey, you want to check out this game?" And I was like, I mean, if it's going to take a lot of time and effort to like jump into it, then like probably not. To be honest, he's like, no, dude, you just go in and like you push buttons. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to hold you to that. Well, sure as shit.
That's all you do.
That's all I had to do. And I was like, all right, I will eat my words. I love this game.
It's a
Cool.
good series, it really is, and that is it's the beauty of being able to press buttons, but, like, if you really wanna, like, learn how to do the combos, like, you could if you wanted to, but you definitely don't have to, so you can just spam the B button a bunch of times and you're good.
Nice. And so you said you also have been playing a little bit of Animal Crossing.
Yeah, yeah, I'm a little ashamed at how much time I put into Animal Crossing when it first came out.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's safe to say you're not the only one that dumped a lot of time.
no.
It came out at a very appropriate time.
I agree. I don't think there could have been a better timing because it came out, right at the height of COVID, and it also came out, um, it was personally, it was a really hard time for me. My grandmother passed away in the spring last year, and, it came out a few days before she passed away, and so, that was a really hard time for me because we were extremely close,
Mhm.
and so I kinda went into this little ball of, like, I'm just gonna hide away and play video games because the world around me is burning, and so,
Sure.
um, I know it sounds silly, but I really do think that it helped me get through some really hard times because it was one of those games that I didn't have to think about. I just
Mhm.
went in and I had these cute little animal villagers and I was growing flowers and building houses. And it was also, I had a small Facebook group where, I might have friends come to my village and be like, hey, do you guys want any of these flowers? Or hey, do you guys want to trade pieces of furniture? And so it was kind of like a friend thing too. It was a way to feel connected to friends without having to physically be together. And that
Sure.
in and of itself was very important. And even today still is. The gaming industry is on an all-time high
Mm-hmm.
between last year and this year, between the new consoles coming out that are non-existent right now. um,
Right.
but it's a way to feel connected to friends when we can't physically be together, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you said that better than I could ever do, given any period of time to prepare. Of course, one of the things that you live and breathe is video games, and I mean, for fuck's sake, you worked at GameStop for a billion years, so you also have that. But like, what you said about Animal Crossing, and it like bridging this gap between people and helping people, stay connected and make new friends even. um that's kind of the big overarching, uh I guess, message I've gotten. Like, I unfortunately, like I said, I don't have a Switch, so I haven't gotten a chance to play it yet. It's definitely on my list, but like, I've heard that it's helped so many people just like work through like mental issues. Like, it's basically like video game version of therapy, or like video game therapy, like, where they can just hop on, and like, it's not necessarily like mindless, like, video gaming, but it's like, it just relaxes you.
It is. I mean, between just like I said, it almost is a little bit mindless in the fact that you don't have to think about it too much. There's not really
Sure.
like a strategy. It's, you have cute villagers and you have flowers and you're on an island by the ocean, and the music itself. Like I play, my Spotify is full of video game soundtracks and anime
Nice.
soundtracks. That's all I listen to. But I have like lo-fi versions of the entire Animal Crossing soundtrack, and I play those when I'm either marketing or when I'm sitting doing work.
That's
It's
fun.
peaceful. Yeah, it is. It's one of those peaceful games, and it has been very nice to see friends or people that I don't know that have come together, and it's helps them with mental health struggles.
Mhm.
It's amazing to see how wonderful video games can be. Growing up, it was like video games are bad for you. Like
Right.
they teach violence. No, they really don't.
Right,
um,
like, we sure showed
yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Look
Um,
how great we're doing mentally, and look how productive we are. Like,
right?
we're adulting. Yay. We're
Woohoo!
doing the thing. We're surviving. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah, and that's the joy of video games is
yeah.
it's there's something out there for everyone, whether you be a casual gamer or a hardcore gamer or somewhere in between. There really is. There's something for everyone, even if it's just Candy Crush on your phone. Like there
Sure.
is something for you out there.
Right, exactly. Crushing that candy. It doesn't get any
Yes.
better than that. Yeah. All right. Well, Kayla, once again, thank you so much for coming on and imparting us with all this fantastic knowledge about voice acting. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. So thank you
Yeah, it's
again.
been so fun. Thanks for having me. I was very excited when you asked me. I was like, "Oh, really? Me?"
Yeah. No, I was hoping you'd say yes, and thankfully you did, because like I said, this has been an absolute blast and pleasure on my side of the table. So, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate it. And like I said, I do have a gift coming your way.
Aw.
I've been working on it today, and I think you'll be excited when you see it. Um,
I'm very excited.
yeah. So yeah, thank you so much again. Um, and listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you've made it this far, as always, congratulations, and I'm sorry. Actually, you know
I'm
what?
sorry too.
Uh, Usually that's like our second to last sign off line when Ted is here, because when it's him and I, like, it's just us bullshitting, for like 60 to 90 minutes, and we're like, if you made it this far, like, congratulations, and I'm sorry, you deserve a plaque. Um, but like, this has actually been a genuine, enjoyable experience, and if you don't think so and you're listening, then congratulations on your long opinion. So but yeah, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, be kind, stay geeky, and eat lots of cheesecake. Bye.
Bye.
There you go.